Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Tian Yu. Coming up in this edition, reports say that Palestine has rejected an Israeli-U.S. proposal to temporarily reopen the Rafah border crossing. The Chinese ambassador to the UN says the two-state solution is the sole viable method for resolving the Middle East issue. And King Charles III has confirmed the abolition of the controversial asylum deal with Rwanda. We begin with the Middle East. Reports say that Palestine has rejected an Israeli-U.S. proposal to temporarily reopen the Rafah border crossing, reiterating their call for Israel's withdrawal and the establishment of Palestinian sovereignty. Meanwhile, an Israeli delegation has arrived in Egypt for ceasefire talks. The Gaza Health Ministry says Israeli forces continued strikes on central and southern Gaza, killing at least 81 Palestinians in the last 24 hours. Akram Al-Satari has more from Hong Yunis.
Continuous, ever-intensified strikes everywhere in the Gaza Strip. Technically everywhere in the Gaza Strip, given that some of them took place in the Gaza North, some of them took place in Gaza City, and even in different parts of the Gaza City, Al-Rimal neighborhood, Al-Shaja'iyya, Al-Sabra, Al-Daraj, Al-Tuffah, and the number of people who were killed is also increasing. Also some bombardment in different parts of the Gaza Center area. Al-Maghazi refugee camp, which is part of the Gaza Middle area, Al-Burej refugee camp, and Nusayrat refugee camp that has been witnessing ever-intensified bombardment for the last 2 or 3 weeks that has claimed the life of around 150 Palestinians. And the overall number of Palestinians killed every day now has been increasing, and the civilians are the ones who are bearing the brunt of that ongoing bombardment and of the intensification of the bombardment that has been further destroying the Gaza Strip and leaving it inhabitable. The UN has been making appeals for the international community and for Israel as a warring party to stop those measures and to try to take into consideration the need to those civilians to rest and respite after the ongoing bombardment have left them almost with nothing. But it looks like Israel is not taking into consideration those calls, is not taking into consideration the measures that are needed according to the dictates of the international covenants related to the war and the rules of war. And the Palestinians are suffering and are likely to continue suffering, with the Israelis pushing further and causing much wider destruction, death, injury, and displacement.
That was Akram Al-Satari reporting from Hong Yunis. The leader of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, says it will hit new Israeli targets if Israel keeps targeting civilians in Lebanon. Israel has denied targeting civilians and says it was striking Lebanon's militants and infrastructure. Sarah Coates has more in Tel Aviv.
Hassan Nasrallah making a televised address saying that the group will beginning to hit Israeli towns, Israeli villages that haven't yet been struck by rockets and drones if Israel continues to kill people inside southern Lebanon, civilians, after a number of attacks over the last few days that have actually seen civilians killed. Now, this comes as these tit-for-tat cross-border strikes are really continuing to escalate. We've actually just got back from a visit to this northern border. We were there for a few days and we really did see a fairly significant escalation last night. Dozens of rockets fired from southern Lebanon claimed by Hezbollah into Israeli territory. A number of these missiles making direct hits, especially in Kiryat Shimona. This is a very close town to that Lebanese border. And this is also an area where some 60,000 Israelis have been evacuated from, with the Israeli government under immense pressure, growing pressure, to restore the security situation in Israel's north. And of course, there's also pressure from the international community, not just on Israel, but also on Hezbollah to pull these fighters further north, back behind the Litani River, amid a lot of fear that this could indeed spiral into a further regional war.
That was Sarah Coates reporting from Tel Aviv. To the United Nations, the Chinese permanent representative to the United Nations has emphasized that the two-state solution is the sole viable method for resolving the Middle East issue. Fu Cong made the remarks when addressing the UN Security Council open debate on the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. He said the international community must pool all its efforts to promote a ceasefire in order to save lives and alleviate the ongoing crisis in Gaza. Jody Jacobs has more on the meeting.
After several meetings and 4 legally binding Security Council resolutions, the conflict in Gaza continues unabated. At Wednesday's meeting here in New York, presided over by Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Council members called for the urgent implementation of last month's resolution, the 3-part phase ceasefire proposal announced by U.S. President Joe Biden in May. Negotiations on that deal have been ongoing, but an agreement is yet to be reached. Recent developments in Gaza, in particular the attack on an Anwar school recently, took center stage at Wednesday's meeting. Council members reiterated their call for an immediate ceasefire, China insisting on an international peace conference that it says should be convened speedily with both parties so that the two-state solution can be implemented.
That was Jody Jacobs reporting. Turning to Europe, King Charles III has confirmed the abolition of the controversial asylum deal with Rwanda as the British monarch gave his speech during the official opening of Parliament. The $130 million saved on the scheme will instead go towards a new border security bill that is meant to grant authorities more powers to tackle illegal migration. Jen Copestake has details from London.
King Charles has addressed the UK state opening of Parliament, outlining the new Labour government's plans for the year ahead. It includes 40 new draft bills that are set to become law. A controversial plan by the previous government to deport some asylum seekers to Rwanda has now been scrapped. The King confirmed the abolition of the Migration and Economic Development Partnership, with the $130 million saved on the scheme being put towards a new border security, asylum and immigration bill. And this bill includes the creation of a new border security command, which Prime Minister Keir Starmer says gives counter-terrorism style powers to tackle people smuggling gangs. Now, there's already been some criticism as to whether these new plans will be effective given the scale of the problem. The Prime Minister will be under considerable pressure to show his government is effective in dealing with illegal immigration after abandoning the Rwanda plan. The plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing was meant to deter migrants from using the channel to cross in small boats from France. Just over 14,000 people have made the crossing so far this year. The Labour government said the existing policies had failed to deter people so far and that the current asylum system is broken. Now, in the days after he was elected in a landslide victory, Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the Rwanda plan was dead and buried. But nearly $380 million has already been sent to Rwanda, where a large construction project to house asylum seekers is already underway. And now no enforced relocations have taken place, according to the new Labour government. But the Rwanda government has already said it's under no obligation to refund any of the money already paid by the UK.
That was Jen Copestake on the British government's new bid to curb immigration. Finally, in Africa, experts say the entrenched political rift in West Africa remains a huge threat to stability in a region already contending with serious security and economic challenges. The recent departure of 3 junta-led states from the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, could also threaten the very survival of the bloc itself. Deji Batmosi talks to political analysts to find out more.
After building a reputation for being one of the strongest regional blocs on the continent, with the capacity to intervene and resolve political crises in its member states, ECOWAS has seen that reputation badly impacted as a result of its handling of the coups in Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso. The 3 military junta-led countries have since pulled out of ECOWAS to form their own union, forcing the once powerful West African regional bloc to soften its initial hardline posture over the coups, opening dialogue and literally appealing to the trio to come back to its fold. ECOWAS has since lifted the sanctions imposed on the 3 countries and opened the door for them to participate in technical, consultative and sectoral meetings of the regional bloc, but all three have remained adamant that they are not coming back to the bloc.
The fragmentation of ECOWAS by these three recalcitrant member countries does not portend good for this West African sub-region. So if ECOWAS is bending backwards from the hardline position they took when the military coupists took over in Niger Republic majorly, I don't think ECOWAS now trying to make them see reason why we should all be together should be seen from the point of view of weakness.
While the trio have chosen to forge ahead with their own bloc, the Alliance of Sahel States, there are questions over whether they have the capacity to tackle the many challenges they currently face on their own.
They are still struggling to survive. And then now, your regional bloc, you exclude yourself from your regional bloc. You know, there are no trades with your regional blocs. Also, your people cannot even relate with your regional blocs. So how do you tend to survive?
Even alone on their own, they are unable to guarantee the peace and security of their state. So if we come together as a bloc, it gives us more strength. So this attempt by them to go all alone is not in the interest of it's not in the interest of their people, it's not in the interest of the West African sub-region. It's purely based on the personal interest of the leadership of the military juntas in those countries.
All eyes are now on Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, who has been appointed as ECOWAS envoy to dialogue with the military regimes of the three countries and convince them to come back to ECOWAS. There are no guarantees at this time that this latest effort by the leadership of the bloc will succeed.
That was Dajid Batmosi on the challenges in West Africa. Recapping today's headlines. Reports say that Palestine has rejected an Israeli-U.S. proposal to temporarily reopen the Rafah border crossing. The Chinese ambassador to the UN says the two-state solution is the sole viable method for resolving the Middle East issue. And King Charles III has confirmed the abolition of the controversial asylum deal with Rwanda. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports, and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tian Yu. Thank you for listening.